Will the talks in Istanbul be able to resolve anything in Russian-Ukrainian war, and why would Trump actually meet with Putin? This and other topics we will discuss right now. My name is Irina Uzlova, and today with us is Yuri Rashkin, a TV host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and Rashkin Report in English, and local elected official in Wisconsin. Yuri, hello, glad to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I feel like I haven't talked about Istanbul this much since, when They Might Be Giants had a hit song about Istanbul, not Constantinople, but here we are again. Hi.
Yes, so Yuri, how can you assess that results of, again, Istanbul negotiations that we saw this week?
Like that song, it's a beautiful distraction. It was a fun song. We kind of all enjoyed it for the time being. It had a great kind of a move to it, made you think of possibilities, and then we went back to things that usually fill up our space in pop music. With this, when it comes to war and the negotiation process, I would say they're kind of disconnected, because really, for those that are not paying close attention at home, these negotiation conversations arose from the quartet of European leaders who expressed their support for Ukraine and put essentially an ultimatum of sorts to Russia, but they wanted to make sure that the United States was going to be coming along with. And so they all together, we saw the beautiful picture with their old sitting with Zelensky and calling Donald Trump and letting him know. Well, Donald Trump said, sure, this why not? Then why not? And then suddenly, Putin comes out with this, let's have negotiations, direct negotiations. Is it because it's just two things happened, time, and sometimes we assign too much importance to things that happen close to each other in time, as if there's meaning. But in this instance, I think there's a pretty direct connection, a chronological connection, and causal connection between one and the other, where Putin's announcement about willingness to negotiate has to do with European leaders showing, spine. And so with that in mind, we just observed this process of negotiations, which on one hand showed Putin's weakness, because he didn't show up. He's the one who talked about this, and in the end, it turned out to be, like what a skunk does, But at the same time, it allowed Putin to prolong the war. And it prolonged the time before sanctions, the ultimatum, is going to be put into effect. And we see this now consistently played out in Washington, I guess, and in Moscow, because both are saying that they will have a great big solution in just a few days. Please come back for your paycheck next week. And it seems unreliable that there is a solution, but maybe their problems is not being solved by these negotiations. Maybe they're just trying to figure out how Putin can conquer Ukraine and Trump can get Ukraine to capitulate. And maybe that's the real objective, and negotiations is just a sideshow. So this sideshow is now more or less over, and it's interesting to what extent Ukrainians no longer trust or hope that Trump will help, because this negotiation process is showing that it resulted in what? In exchange of prisoners. That's not even really anything to do with the ceasefire. It has nothing to do with territorial questions, but it allows, if Donald Trump was interested in putting pressure on Russia, then he would look at this and say, justifiably, that Russia is impossible to have negotiations with because, well, at the very least, they're not ready right now. They're just not ready right now. And because they're not ready right now, in order to get them to be ready, more assistance, more aid needs to be provided to Ukraine. I mean, that seems like the logical conclusion here. But when we see another outcome, when we see, then perhaps we just need to apply more pressure to Ukraine so that they would surrender faster, then that would really make it seem like it's Donald Trump and his administration are hard for Ukrainians to trust and have much faith in that it's going to be be a good development for them. Now, does it really matter what Ukrainians think about Donald Trump? Not so much, not anymore. Did it matter before election? Kind of, a little bit, because there's a lot of people with Ukrainian roots who lived in the United States, vote in the United States, and were hopeful, and so their misplaced sense of hope led them to vote for President Trump, who is now doing everything in his power to get to peace, to stop carnage, aka Ukraine's capitulation. So that's, those kinds of moments of realization of what is really happening, they are sometimes happening too fast, but nonetheless, I feel that they're important. And therefore, there is no trust in negotiation, and there's no trust that Trump and Putin meeting is going to solve anything. Because we saw a meeting between Trump and Putin in 2018 in Helsinki, which was another day of national shame for the United States. Shame. And so to imagine that we're going to have another meeting between these two men, and it's going to go somehow better because Donald Trump said that until he meets with Putin, then nothing will be decided, which, by the way, invalidates and delegitimizes the entire negotiation process as well, then we have to come to this realization. When we have these authoritarian types come to power, and there's some of us, people who are, mean nothing to them, and we think that now we're going to have a strong man that's going to get our problems fixed by their dictatorial methods. It's okay because we need solutions. Democracy is weak, strong men are strong. Let's do this. Without realizing that strong men will just solve their problems using us. They will use us to solve their problems. And that's what we see right now with the Trump administration in the way that it is approaching its best attempt at trying to get good relations with Russia at the cost of Ukraine, at the cost of reputation of the United States. It's interesting to observe what happens when Russian mafia essentially gets to use an American president but doesn't know what to do with it. And so they're trying to navigate using Steve Witkoff. They're trying to navigate using Kirill Dmitriev. But Donald Trump is just fundamentally very impatient. And I feel like his status of Employee of the Month is in serious danger and threat in Kremlin. Because rather than being cool and chill, he keeps rushing, because Vladimir Putin would not have looked weak in Istanbul had Donald Trump not called him out, essentially, and said that he will be there, kind of putting more pressure on Putin to be in Turkey and to be at this negotiation. So Trump made Putin look bad. So I don't see how this is like helping their relations, if you think about it. But the way Donald Trump acts about his relationship with Vladimir Putin really starts to make me wonder if this affection has more to do with fear, because he's just acting as if he's afraid of Putin. And we can say, how? That doesn't make sense. I'm not saying about the things whether they're making sense or not. I'm saying if we put that as a variable in our formula, does it make sense? And if it does, maybe we should think about it. And if we go 2 plus x equals 4, 4 minus 2 equals 2. So, I mean, this is just arithmetic. My apologies to anyone who is here for politics exclusively. But I think that those kinds of things make sense. And so how long Americans are going to be looking at our president and thinking, wow, he's really close to Putin and really wants to be closer to Putin, and think that this is okay is a good question.
But we see that Putin isn't so close to Donald Trump, and he only wants to use him for his own personal, political and financial interests. And that's all. And make Putin great again, really, to withdraw him from international isolation.
You're absolutely right. And it's very obvious, I think, to everyone but evidently Donald Trump. Because everybody else is seeing what's happening. Some people like it, some people don't like it. But Donald Trump seems to be very willing to play along and is looking for opportunity to essentially be used. When I try to figure out and understand why Putin is avoiding Trump, other than, I mean, we heard that he smells, that's information from the trials, from people who were there. But I don't think that would really stop Vladimir Putin from communicating with American president. So whatever. But there's an interesting possibility here that perhaps the relationship that is developing between Putin and Xi Jinping is standing in the way of meeting with Donald Trump because, well, you saw who was paraded on Red Square on May 9th. It wasn't Donald Trump. It wasn't Russian weaponry so much as it was Xi Jinping. The fact that his interpreter was yelling louder than Vladimir Putin was speaking so that this Chinese leader could understand what was being said, which was clearly more important than whatever Putin was actually saying in Russian, I think sends a couple of important signals here about who is running the show. I started to think about in Russian history, there's this important component explaining sometimes why Russia is so behind times, is because for several hundred years they were under Tatar-Mongolian ego. So they were under rule of Genghis Khan and all those Mongolian, superpower chieftains. And I wonder sometimes if people who lived at the time in Russia, if they understood that they were actually owned by some other country, that they were, it's historical books then later reflected that that was essentially a fact, even though there's lots of questions about the nature of the Tatar-Mongolian ego and all of those details. But the fundamental being part my thinking here is what are people under occupation? Do they even realize that they're under occupation? And that goes both for Russian relationship with China as it is going towards the possible explanation of American relationship with Russia at the moment, because we have a president who is so clearly acting in the best interests of Russian state, and however Putin understands those interests to be, that to me, I think attempted persecution of former director of the FBI, Director Comey, is a very clear example of who's running the show, because as well, I suppose, as much as statements against Bruce Springsteen and Taylor Swift. This is a very anti-American kind of an administration. And why would there be an anti-American administration? Is there a possibility that we have our ship is being run by somebody else for some other purposes? Do we even recognize it? Do we want to know these things? It's a very sobering moment in American history. We're used to movies where things end well after a reasonable amount of time, sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter. Sometimes you wish they developed the character a little more, told the story a little better, but it usually kind of ends well. Like Shawshank Redemption could have been a very different movie if the main character did not escape. But here we have a situation where elections have consequences, and how people are going to, what conclusions they're going to make from all of this also remains an open question.
Yuri, I know that you had a dispute with my colleague Roma Cymbaluk, with my guest and our host of Channel 24, that Trump will go to Moscow on May 9th. And we see that, no, Trump didn't go to Moscow this time. Because you understand that it's his dream. I agree with you in this moment that he wants to have a great meeting, great summit with Russian dictator Putin, and maybe not only once. And I know that you donated 2,000 euros and even more, Roma tell me during our interview, for our forces. Thank you very much for this your step, very clear, smart and honest, and our forces can say thank you too for you, Yuri. But why didn't Trump go anyway? Because I thought these days that he could have justified his actions as like considering that he Xi Jinping, yes, went, so he can too. And we see that Trump can give answers for all his illegal steps, unnormal behavior. He thinks that he can do everything he wants. So why? Why didn't he go?
There's really a short answer to this, Irina. Ukraine. Because had Ukraine capitulated, found peace, agreed to peace on Trump-Putin's terms, then it really would have helped. But because Ukraine would not surrender or capitulate or do anything of that kind, it made it impossible for Donald Trump to go to Red Square and stand there next to Xi Jinping and Putin. There was another problem that prevented, I think, Trump from going, and that is really standing next to Xi Jinping, because at the time he was still engaged in a trade war with China, which he couldn't he couldn't lose in time to be in Moscow, because China wouldn't negotiate with him. They wouldn't honor him by meeting him and allowing him the honor of capitulating quickly. And therefore, that was another reason I feel that he couldn't be there on Red Square. But a couple of words about the bet that we made, because I think it is important to mention, because it's a sum of money. See, me and Roma, we have Roman Cymbaluk is an amazing journalist who is beloved in Ukraine, and it's just an honor and privilege for me and joy to do weekly streams with him that are on my channel and his channel. It's really great, and he is also in channel 24, so it's wonderful. And we were discussing what was happening, likely to happen on May 9th, and it occurred to me a couple of months prior to that there's a really good chance. I mean, it just everything that Donald Trump is doing really makes him look like he wants to be there if at all possible. He would love it to be there. And I thought, as an American, it's just such an embarrassment, kind of a shame. Shameful would be to see American president on Red Square, even though it doesn't mean that much to Americans as it does to Russians and Ukrainians. But for me, as somebody who was born in Moscow and as a naturalized citizen of the United States, and I consider myself an American, this would be such a despicable act that I would feel obligated to contribute something to Ukraine armed forces, especially considering that President Trump hasn't approved a new package of aid to Ukraine yet. So, and then probably won't, because it would be for free, and we don't do things for free anymore, because, that's dumb. Anyway, so that did not occur, and, but Roma, he's kind of he has this kind of I feel like a gambling thing, and he was like, let's make a bet, and I was okay, and it turned out that I bet that Trump will come to Red Square on May 9th, and I thought, well, why not? Sure. I mean, he wants to. Let's see if it happens. And it didn't happen. But May 10th, the day after May 9th, is my birthday. And I thought, for a variety of reasons, because I lost a bet, and because I feel like thanks to lots of viewers in Ukraine who are so curious about what's going on in the United States, my channel, Rashkin Report, has really grown tremendously. And I feel like I owe it to my viewers to show support for things that are important to all of us by supporting Ukraine armed forces. And so I felt like this was something that kind of tells me about where I am in life, that for my birthday, I'm not looking for, I just turned 50. So for my birthday, I wasn't looking for something that would be like a present for me, like, ooh, can I have this toy? Like President Trump said this Christmas, there will be 2 dolls instead of 30. And I was like, I don't even want a doll. But maybe I want to do a present for somebody else on my birthday. And so all of that together, and I gave a donation for 100,000 hryvnias to ZSU, and I'm not sure exactly what the exchange rate is. And somebody looked at that and said, oh my gosh, it looks like euros. Did Yuri just give a donation for 100,000? No, I'm not at that. The channel is not at that level of success yet. But I was glad to be able to do what I did, and it's wonderful. So, and sometimes money is the simplest way to show that you mean what you say. And so why, if that sends a message that I'm serious about what I'm saying, sure, then I'm glad to do it.
But today we see that Vatican is like Istanbul and even more, maybe, yes, new Vatican. We saw a summit between Trump and Zelensky a few weeks ago when we all world told goodbye to Pope Francis. And today we see that Zelensky urges Rubio and Vance to increase pressure to Russia. In Rome, President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, held a meeting with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The parties discussed Istanbul, pressure on Russia, and other matters, according to our information by our Ukrainian president. So, Yuri, and we see that they are smiled, they are rather calm and discuss a lot of topics against Russia, and even face of J.D. Vance is not the same face that we saw on February 28.
Well, when you see J.D. Vance in Vatican, you feel like you have to be a pretty brave pope to meet with him at that point, considering the recent history. But in this instance, I feel like we have a very young, optimistic pope, and Pope Leo XIV, who is clearly looking at his platform as an opportunity to reach peace, not the kind of false peace as was described by former Secretary Blinken, which is kind of what we're trying to achieve right now, is this false peace, but some actual lasting peace, or at least real peace. And I think that it is really admirable and important to acknowledge, because Ukrainians who I speak with, virtually all the time, are very suspicious of the Pope, because last Pope, who in the West, so to say, in the English-speaking world, in America, is generally been Pope Francis, was viewed very, very favorably, who's somebody who really tried to do his best for poor people in this world who are struggling, suffering, and really kind of have the Catholic Church look in that direction. And at the same time, it's the same Pope who was speaking about peace between Ukraine and Russia in terms that were much friendlier and acceptable to Kremlin than were to Ukraine. And so I think that he was viewed with a lot of suspicion, if not outright negativity, in Ukraine. However, I think that this Pope offers a new beginning, and I feel deserves a new chance. And it seems to take a much stronger pro-Ukrainian point of view, including having criticized J.D. Vance prior to having become a pope. But here he is with J.D. Vance and Pope and Zelensky. This is like a beginning of some kind of apocalyptic joke, where Zelensky, J.D. Vance, and Pope Leo XIV walk into a bar, and I don't know, the story ends, because that can't be, but yet here it is. And I feel like it's also, you can say that this is another opportunity for J.D. Vance to provide more pressure on Ukraine, because now the program hasn't changed, agenda hasn't changed. The desire to pressure Ukraine into essential surrender is remaining there. The fact that J.D. Vance and Zelensky can sit face to face speaks not necessarily to their maturity, which perhaps I believe is in the case of Zelensky, but in the more of their hollowness, as in the case of Vance, who is very flexible in terms of what he says, what he believes, who he communicates with. Those things, I think, again, a spine, moral grounding is lacking there, which allows him to create these kind of really different moments, from when he is attacking Zelensky to when he's smiling at Zelensky. But that's, part of the administration. So at the same time, what is Ukraine going to surrender and agree to kill itself? That seems kind of unlikely. So I would say that this is opportunity to show once again that J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, had to overcome himself and sit down and show that Zelensky is a real leader of Ukraine, a very real country, because Vice President of the United States wouldn't be meeting with some kind of a fake leader or some kind of fake country, right? So that's by him being there, that legitimizes Ukraine, that legitimizes Zelensky, and those are things that J.D. Vance was essentially denying. So it seems that things are not going very well for J.D. Vance and Trump administration if they're willing to sit down in any way, shape, size, or form 2 months after February 28th or month and a half or whatever, still continuing to talk to this pesky Zelensky character who just won't go away and continues to stand up and fight for his country. It's an interesting dynamic, but at least it's important to acknowledge that as United States has given up on the mantle of attempting to be a moral leader, Vatican and Pope Leo XIV appears to have very willingly taken up that burden.
And according to our today's discussion and to former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbst, who said that Trump is effectively stuck with an unpleasant dilemma of his own making. He must decide whether it is more important to end the war in Europe or to be friends with the autocrat who is the most dangerous adversary for the United States since Xi Jinping. So what can Trump choose? We cannot exactly say.
I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation that we're in, because the decision is not whether Donald Trump is going to quit on Vladimir Putin. The decision is, because that's not us and that's not in our ability to control. However, when Europe and when people who are hoping that the United States is going to come along and be part of anti-Russia coalition, at what point they will give up, that's the question. Because that we are leading essentially to a scenario end game here where Russia is going to be receiving armaments from the United States, where Putin is going to be invited to come and speak in front of our joint house, Congress, Senate, and like Zelensky did, because that's the end game where we're moving to right now. Now, we can go there faster, we can go there sooner, we can go there slower. Right now, Europeans are trying to go there slower. They're pretending that this is a choice that Trump is making, and at some point, I guess they will no longer be able to pretend. How long it will take Europeans and all sensible people like former Ambassador Herbst to arrive to this realization publicly is going to determine how long we're going to be before we enter into the next stage of this unfolding drama. And if we're going to be understanding that United States is not actively interested at all in helping Ukraine and is using negotiations as a distraction from sanctions on Russia, and therefore allowing Putin to continue his war, therefore demonstrating clearly that the United States is only going to be a stick in the wheel of any efforts to help Ukraine and to provide pressure on Russia, and how long Ukraine and how long Europe and Ukraine are going to be essentially humoring this American administration that is expecting them to do at the same time things that they will not do. That's the kind of this dance that we're observing right now that inevitably will end, because Russia will not stop, Donald Trump will not quit on Putin, and it's only the question of what people that can do something about this will do about their own reaction to this instead of waiting for Trump.
Yuri, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this interview, for our discussion, and for our every week summits. See you next week. Take care.
Take care.
Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and Rashkin Report in English, and a local elected official in Wisconsin, was with us, with me, Irina Uzlova. Thank you guys for watching, for joining us. Please subscribe to our YouTube channels and take care. See you.